Hello, in this video I'm going to discuss the myth of the noble savage. I'm going to open up with a clip of Bill Whittle talking about the Aztecs while he was discussing points made by historian Victor Davis Hanson in his book Carnage and Culture.
He talks to two conflicts in particular. He talks about Hernan Cortez and his maybe 1,000 Spanish conquistadors conquering the Aztec empire of 4, 5, 6 million people. By the way, those of you who are interested in these kind of things, I think the Aztecs were probably the worst people that ever lived on the face of the earth. And when the Aztec empire was dedicating its new pyramid, which was designed for human sacrifice, they had 4 bulls, 4 priests. The priests were rotating in and out because they were sacrificing. Sit down now. The Aztecs, when they dedicated their new temple, were executing 18 people a minute. A minute. That's actually higher than the factory death rate at Auschwitz. 18 people a minute. The Aztecs sacrificed 80,000 captives in 4 days. They put them up on the top of the pyramid, ripped their heart out with an obsidian blade, cut it out, held it up, kicked the body down to the ground. Priests down there would take the skin off the human body and they'd wear it like a cape. So Hernan Cortez comes into Teotihuacan, the Aztec capital, and after a course of battles and arranging allies with other Indian troops, Cortez defeats the Aztecs.
but my noble savage. That anyway. So, what do you hear about history? Over a decade ago, I read the book Aztec by Gary Jennings. I'd liken it to something Tolkien-esque, but based in America leading up to and including the arrival of Cortez and the other colonials. The imagery of this book has stuck with me through the ages, and if you liked the 2006 film Apocalypto, this book will be a must-read for you. Even if you didn't like the film or hadn't seen it, it's a rather fascinating book. So I'm gonna go into some light spoilers about the book to follow, and include images from Apocalypto, so those might be light spoilers for that film too. Through the book Aztec, you follow the protagonist, Mixley Darkcloud, through the Aztec Empire and meet and see marvels and horrors that he encounters. For example, there was one village where everyone was beautiful, youthful, and healthy. So you might be thinking a little magical fountain of youth here, but no. Any ill or malformed children were left to the elements to die. And the adults that fell gravely ill or began to become old would willingly walk off into the wilderness, never to be heard of again. Then there's also a story, I think, about one of his early loves, who was a vision to behold but somewhat narcissistic, as many gifted with beauty can become. We lose track of her for a while in the story, and later find her in a menagerie of oddities as the tapir woman, a grotesquerie that had been created after she was subjected to flames that slowed her flesh into a conical tapir shape, with her tongue occasionally lashing out. This is one of those situations where the vivid writing combined with my rather active imagination can be more of a curse than a good thing. The contents in the book did give off a part noble, part savage when it came to the Aztecs. I saw a review of the book where someone claimed that it gave them a chance to learn about Aztec history and should be given to students of history. So when it comes to historical fiction, it's good to read if you do like it, but I wouldn't advise it to be considered as historical. As canonical of what happened in history. There are parts of the book that are canonical or accurate, as Jennings did go into lengths to actually keep that as part of it, and I think that some of the best books do have that grounding in reality. But at the same time, it should be avoided being considered as a historical text. It's bad enough when you have straightforward textbooks that are romanticized, mythologized, and sanitized from the realities of the time. When it comes to the history of non-white cultures, the amount of blood-soaked carnage that they're usually steeped in is quite often whitewashed. This is often done by white people who do not do the same for their own histories. Now, I understand that we in general want to focus on the positives of things that we have, especially don't speak ill of the dead, that kind of a mentality. But again, as I said, this is something that's usually done for non-white cultures, yet white cultures, we constantly bring up the negatives that they did. And many of these cultures and people, for example, we're talking about the Aztecs here, they did not do anywhere close to as thorough a job in cataloging their histories as some of the white cultures did. And let's be clear that I'm speaking about some here, because, for example, when Rome fell, it was not due to savage coloreds, but other whites. The term barbarian was not developed to describe Moors or other people who were not native to the European continent. See, even the language we use to describe some of these horrors were invented by certain cultures that found these things worth identifying and noting. A good example that I gave in the video, they literally mean figuratively, was how the term genocide came to be. So, I'm sure some pre colonial American cultures had the concept of zero before the Europeans did, but did they have a concept of what described a level of brutality such as the aforementioned 80,000 dispatched souls? No, it's quite unlikely. They did this in a mode of celebration. Even the comparison that Mr. Whittle gives to the horrors of the Nazis is not quite right. These concentration camps were horrendous, but they were not celebrated. You know, they weren't something that was carried out in a 4th of July style, broadcast to the populace in joy and pomp, directly carried out by supposedly the very best their societies had to offer. I mean, this was the priesthood, this was the people would relish these things. It's just quite horrific. So apparently some of these cultures also had rudimentary but working drainage and piping systems. Is this considered noble enough to ignore that part of why they developed this could have been so they could better channel the gore, bile, blood from their frequent ritual sacrifices? Well, there's something here that you have to think about. I mean, if something is not worth identifying, it's usually not that important to you. This goes back into why I have issues with some of these people who just say there's problems. For example, institutionalized racism. They'll say institutionalized racism is a thing. When you ask them to define what they mean by racism or institution, or let's give examples of it, they'll tell you educate yourself, or they'll say, it's not my job to tell you this, or if you can't see this, you're part of the problem. But no, if something is a problem, I would personally want to identify that thing, give it a name, figure out why it happens, how it can be stopped. And I think that's why some of these cultures took the time to identify something as horrific as genocide. That's why some cultures took the time to identify what actually slavery was. I mean, slavery had been going on for so long, but I think once you name what slavery is, define it, and then you go to the trouble of ending it, and then you're the ones who are considered evil for being the people who actually named it, cataloged it, identified it, figured out how to break it up, kept a history of it, actually have some guilt from taking part in it. I mean, there's just so much here that really, really annoys me. But I'm going to call that a rant here. I mean, creating my own content now and busy with a few things here in Nairobi, so I haven't been able to listen to as much content as I once did. And Bill Whittle just started the Bill Whittle Live. Actually, he started it after the inauguration. I think January 20th is when he started a great series. You should definitely check that out if you have the time. I'd actually rather you check that out rather than my channel for now, because his material is rather amazing, inspiration to me. Dr. Victor Davis Hansen is also pretty awesome. You can check out some of his videos online, and I think I'll be trying to make some time to watch Bill Whittle live, and also I think it's time to get that book. Might actually go with physical paper, although I'll probably stick with the audiobook, but thanks for listening. Until next time. Bye.